I often have questions about what is going to happen to this country. And there are questions about many areas of the society, and this is one of many areas of that society. If you understood that our violent crime in Jamaica, our levels of violence are closest to the highest in the world, and this is the violence in general, and you ask yourself, how is this going to help? How are we going to make that change in this country? And you think of many different areas of the society. Now, I do not have the luxury of simply just looking at it and saying, how is it going to happen? But I have to think, what can my involvement be, and how can that be impacted? I'll say a few things that I think speak to that issue. I think when more Jamaicans start to tell the story about both HIV and homosexual experiences in that society, it may raise greater anger in Jamaican society, but it will bring another kind of engagement to the experience. There's an almost knee-jerk reaction to a news story that comes from outside. It is a knee-jerk reaction because for all our headaches and problems as a society, we're a fiercely proud society. And even there's some gay Jamaicans that would say, I just don't want bad name going out there. Even they who know what they're going through as a kind of knee-jerk reaction. And it introduces all kinds of headaches because of the way some of those stories have happened. But the stories have to get out there. So there has to be a way for those stories to be told in that culture and in that society. And projects that are media driven that are able to do that more, whether it's through photo voice projects or sort of internal journalist projects that are done, protecting people but giving them a chance to articulate those voices. Those voices will return to that society and speak to that society. I think that is important. I also think that it is important to capitalize on events that slowly start to erode certain kinds of attitudes by removing fear. I mentioned the Calabash Festival, but I have to say this because this year we canceled the festival because of a lack of funding. And a few days after the cancellation, in fact a few hours after the cancellation was made public, thousands of letters were being written into the government and so on and so forth, because one of the articulated reasons for the shortage of funds was that this festival was starting to be a little too sort of sympathetic and open to homosexual people who want to come and say things at the festival. Because a few years before, a writer called Thomas Glave had gone on stage when the Prime Minister had made a very ridiculous statement, well, not ridiculous, it was a true statement, that he would not have any gay men in his cabinet. And he made that declaration in England. And that same year, Thomas Glave went on stage and did an open letter in front of 3,000 people to the Prime Minister of Jamaica saying this is nonsense. It was a very harsh letter and so on. Well, obviously this got back, and there was an undercurrent of that implication there. But the hue and cry and the noise that was made in response to the cancellation was enough to release the funding, and the festival took place. At that same festival, the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Edward Seaga, stood on the same stage, on the same panel as Stacey Ann Chin, somebody who's well known here in the States, an openly lesbian woman, and they read on the same stage. Now, to me, and everybody was saying, don't let it happen. Put him on another panel and put her on another panel. And say, well, they're writing similar books. They're memoirs. Where would we put? He's not a poet. And so we said, no, we'll just put it on. It'll be fine. It is Calabash. Calabash understands this, and Jamaica will understand this. There was no stoning. There was no noise. But no, this is not a dramatic change. This doesn't change homophobia, but it's a sort of erosion of these anxieties that exist in that society to see those people on the stage. I think it is possible to start thinking about ways in which those things are eroded, whether it is through writers writing and whether it's through artists telling stories. For me, I can manage that. I know where I am in that space. I have a handle on that, and I think that kind of change is possible. I think that one of the key parts of the way in which the narratives are told is the matter of trust. Because I'll be frank with you, my being able to tell the story about HIV/AIDS in Jamaica was because many people I knew who knew me beforehand and said, I can trust Kwame and I'll tell him the story. And frankly, some of the people Micah spoke to, they spoke to him because they knew that I had come before and they knew we were connected because Micah spoke to me beforehand. In other words, there is because trust is critical. It's absolutely critical to get the story out. And one of the ways in which you create trust is to have people who have an articulated and honest interest in the well-being of those who are living in that society to see if some change can be made. So it's a heavy heart thing for me to see this experience, to see anybody living in this kind of fearful way. But at the same time, it's a heavy heart thing to see that this is my country that has these problems. But for me, that is it's a call to say we have to find a way to do better and to make some kind of change and so on. And those are just a few things that I think would be really important and hopefully can make a change.
Thanks, Kwame. That's, I think, an excellent way to conclude this portion of the panel and open up for questions. So, questions? Yes.
You have been talking about that money is not the problem of the issue in the Caribbean in order to find a huge difference. So if the problem is not the money and it's interesting ideas, why none of you have been able to identify that behind that lack of ideas there is another systemic problem in the Caribbean society is that the educational system is completely broke. And if you don't educate the society in social level to produce those ideas from within, because it doesn't matter if the most multi-billionaire company invests in the society when the local have not even access to gain the tools that will help them to fight that battle. So talking about that, I guess if you go a little deeper in your analysis about why the anti-gay movement is so strong in the very conservative society of the Caribbean, is because the educational system doesn't have any source of educate young local leaders to resolve the problem with authentic solutions that doesn't mean money, but means fresh ideas. So I wonder if there is any way to start talking about solutions from, rather than make the gap between the gay population and the so-called normal society, you don't go a little deeper and make a statement that include the government and provide those support network in order to sustain that solution with the local. Because I mean, somebody that studied in New York City at Columbia University lack the whole cultural intelligentsia to understand the Caribbean society that is so complex.
Thanks. I just want to encourage people to tell us who they are and also to get quickly to the questions. But can you please tell us your name?
Okay, Ariel Rojas, president and founder of Trans-Diaspora Network, an HIV prevention organization that deal with the Caribbean descendant youth in Brooklyn.
Thanks. Does anyone want to speak to the issue of education?
I agree about the importance of education. And the idea of education, and one of the sort of heartbreaking things about Micah is really, and I think these are very important documentaries that he's done, was when I heard some teenagers almost echoing the same kind of rhetoric that the parliamentarian was echoing. And why that was heartbreaking to me was that it seemed to run counter to some of the things I encountered in the same school you were at, because I know the school. And I thought, my goodness, I thought that what was going on was that with the advent of the internet and other dialogue, the younger people were still more open and willing and so on. But of course, they're competing with, as Jason talked about, they're competing with the popular culture, the dancehall music, which is homophobic and it's seductive in its character. But I think education is definitely necessary, because what you say when you say education, then you start talking about the economic dynamics of these societies and the poverty. And poverty is a big part of the way this narrative unfolds. It's not everything, but it's a big part of it. And I believe that if there were means by which the younger people could start to find alternate ideas of how to debate and have difference of opinion and so on, it could make a tremendous difference. How you turn education to be then the answer for things like homophobia, that is really hard for funders to really get. You understand? It's really hard to sort of explain that unless the education is about that, then it's not going to open that. But if you say, you know, reading Jamaica Kincaid's Lucy might make a big difference in terms of issues or Patricia Powell's novel, the Pagoda, would make a difference in their openness to the idea of people having different views and different ways of living. It's hard to make that connection. I believe in that connection, but it's just harder to make that connection for funding purposes. But I certainly believe in that connection.
It is interesting that, you know, the Gates Foundation, which is the sort of the two-ton gorilla in the private funding world, has taken on both HIV and education. Education funding is very tough funding to do in terms of systemic reform. Yeah. We have, which I know is what you're really talking about, we have funded HIV-specific interventions in the Dominican Republic, in Trinidad, in Panama, and Guatemala. One of the big questions we've had at the Matt Gates Fund is whether schools really are the best place to talk about these subjects or not. We've also, you know, particularly for at-risk youth who have bad experience. I mean, I don't know, I didn't have a great experience in health class myself, but, you know, I think that the question is, where are the cultural institutions, whether it be churches or sports teams, where children go to listen and to you know, learn about and feel, you know, back to Kwame's stories of his brother, to feel safe enough to have those conversations where Kwame can say to his brother, did you think it was okay that they beat him up, or do you think, you know, that was not the right thing to do? But you're absolutely right that that's a huge issue.
Let me add just one dimension to it, which is, oh, sorry.
The real challenge is that the people who can make the change don't have the balls to make the change. Recently there was a sociology book removed from the system because it suggested that amongst alternate families, 2 men living together and 2 women living together could be seen as a family unit. Right. The Ministry of Education pulled that book because a parent saw it and raised an alarm. So the people who can help facilitate the change through the education system don't have the balls to do it. That's really the challenge.